Hello, and welcome to the Iaconian Archives. I am the archivist, your host and reader. In this episode, I will be sharing an excerpt from I Must Cry Out Loud by author ros3bud009, in which an angsty Swerve, newly returned from Ratchet's funeral, faces his loneliness. So pour yourself a glass of Enjex, get comfortable at your console or in your berth, close your optics, and let's enter the archives. Swerve had worried that things would feel different after Ratchet's funeral. Not because of the death itself. Swerve felt badly that part wasn't scary to face, not after all the death he had spent near his entire life surrounded by. If anything, there was relief when he arrived at the ceremony. For someone he had known and respected like Ratchet to have a real funeral with a crowd of those who actually knew and loved him, and a monument and a service and a conjunks dressed in full funeral attire, there was relief in knowing Ratchet had lived long enough that he could receive the funeral he deserved. Nothing like the hurried procedural affairs that Swerve had seen time and again during the war. Well, when the dead received any acknowledgement at all. The terror came in seeing the old crew again. Old friends, the people Swerve exchanged messages a couple times a year with if he was lucky, heard about through the grapevine, passed gossip about back across to the folks who hadn't heard yet. And there had been, as he had guessed, the hurried apologies for lost contact. Busy. So busy. So busy. Less common but frequently said were the half-sparked promises. We'll have to see each other again soon. I'll keep in contact. I'll call. This time went unsaid because it would remind them all that the odds that any of those promises would be kept were slim to none. Swerve felt numb as he went through the same motions himself, saying the same things in the same ways. And when Swerve went back home, slipping into the washroom as if he needed to wash the funeral off his plating before going to work, as if the customers would smell the mourning on him, he realized that worried wasn't quite right. And when Swerve went down to the bar, going through the motions of preparing to open for the night, he realized that maybe worried was right, in a way. Swerve hadn't worried that something would change. He had hoped that something would change. He had worried that nothing would. It had been a brief reminder of the good old days before, back to the same old present day and nothing more. And finally, out of the numbness, his spark ached in its longing. Swerve shook his helm before reaching up to slap his own cheeks. "Cut it out," he chastised himself sharply, giving himself another couple of light slaps when his chest still throbbed with pain. "Stop, stop, stop!" It took a few more slaps before Swerve's processor cleared just enough that he could force himself into movement again, pouring out a small shot that he threw back with a grimace. "Get it together," he continued as he put the glass down to fill again. Yes, he was disappointed, but he knew that was how it was going to go, and that was fine. He was fine. He just needed to get all the chairs off of the tables and make sure the bar was stocked and the glasses all lined up and ready to go. And once the bar was in swing, he wouldn't have time to think anymore. Tears welled as Swerve gritted his teeth against the swelling familiarity of his loneliness. And then came the pounding of a fist against the front door. Swerve jumped, blinking and reaching up to slip his digits under his visor to make sure all the liquid was gone. A customer, of course, back to normal. "We're not open yet," Swerve shouted after taking a slow invent. It was only really out of habit that he bothered shouting, considering the bar took up residence in one of the few buildings remaining that was made out of war-era materials. The walls were thick, which lent themselves well to keeping Swerves from receiving noise complaints from any neighboring businesses or homes. It did not lend itself well to shouting at customers to read the damn business hours. The knocking stopped for a bit, and Swerve hoped they would give up easy. They didn't. The knocking started up again, and it was incessant. It didn't turn aggressive in the way some would, but it was so consistent and unending that it had long outlived being polite either. Swerve sighed as he mustered up the energy to go over and deal with the customer. Of all the things he had been prepared for after his day, particularly obnoxious customers had not been on the list, but it was a distraction at least. And then, all at once, the knocking paused before being followed by the signature hum of blaster fire, followed by the slam of the front door against the wall, and then everything was deafening chaos as the security alarm began to blare. "What the frag?" Swerve cursed as he ducked behind the sturdy bar, scrambling for the button to open the weapon compartment within. There wasn't time to even consider the pang in his chest at seeing My First Blaster 2 Electric Boogaloo in all of its patronizingly multicolored glory before he had it in servo and pushed back up to his feet, peering over the bar surface again, but now with the muzzle of the gun aimed into the room. "If you think I won't shoot—" "Swerve!" The sudden pounding of Energon beating mercilessly against his audiols nearly managed to blanket the sound of the alarm. Wide purple wings and wide open arms and a wide excited grin. Swerve rebooted his visor, but the mech was still stood there. No, walking. The blaster being tucked away as he was quickly walking over. And there was no way, and yet, misfire? And then those wide arms were fearlessly reaching across the bar to pluck Swerve up from where he had ducked for cover. Swerve couldn't stop the squeak that escaped as he was bodily pulled halfway across the bar's surface and his face squashed up against unmoving armor. "Fragging, finally! Do you have any idea how hard it is to track you down?" the mech complained, even if his tone was too maniacally excited to sound anywhere in the same galaxy as irritated. And yes, as he pulled Swerve back from his chest to get a look at him, Swerve got one in turn, and that was definitely misfire. Tall, relatively. Handsome, in Swerve's opinion. Goofy, undeniably. Misfire. "Primus, hold on, let me—" It took longer than normal for Swerve to scrounge up the remote program to deactivate the blaring alarm, but he managed, and finally there was blessed silence. A window popped up in his HUD, inquiring if police services would be needed, and Swerve chose no before entering his personal code to verify it was him, and yes, really, everything was actually all right. Misfire was bouncing on his feet, in turn, bouncing Swerve's frame, and finally a disbelieving laugh escaped Swerve. "Okay, now that that's taken care of, what the frag?" Swerve asked, aware that he was still smiling despite himself. And, of all things, Misfire pulled him to his chest again, his flight engine purring with delight as he held Swerve's frame tight, and either he was nuzzling or pressing kisses to the top of Swerve's hood. It was hard to tell when all Swerve could see was purple. "Didn't think I'd actually let you get away, did you?" You can find this story posted in its entirety at archiveofourown.org, along with nearly 40,000 original Transformers transformative works. Give it a read and let the author know what you thought. Comments and kudos encourage authors to keep producing their art. Please subscribe to this channel and you'll know when new videos are posted. As always, comments and suggestions are welcome below. If you would like to suggest a story or a selection from a longer fanfic for reading here on the Iaconian Archives, please view our video from the archivist suggesting content, and you could hear me read some of your favorite Transformers fanfiction. From tonight's author and myself, thank you for your time and support.